I want to talk to you about Red Ed Milishambles. He's been reported for breaching the Ministerial Code. That's right, my friends. The holier-than-thou Labour Party, the anti-sleaze crusaders, and the Change Party. That is, you got any spare? And of course, unless it's freebies from Lord Ali, well, they're up to their necks in heat pump boiled tepid water. The eco-tycoon Dale Vince, who bankrolled some of Labour's election campaign, has just had his company's massive solar farm approved on prime agricultural land. What a happy coincidence. Nick Timothy MP, a Conservative, calls it a blatant conflict of interest. He says this in The Telegraph. It's difficult to see how Ed Miliband has not broken the Ministerial Code in making this decision, which benefits a significant Labour donor. There is no case for constructing these giant solar and battery farms on agricultural land. But Miliband's net zero zealotry means more of these monstrosities are heading for rural communities. And they're the same rural communities that families will be selling off shortly because of their tax grab. We want food security in this country, not solar subsidy. And what a Miliband hypocrite he really is. The man who has the charisma of a damp dishcloth has just hired himself a vanity photographer, paid for, of course, by you. This is the same Ed Miliband who raged at the Tories for doing exactly the same thing.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about hard choices this week. Because who has he chosen to put on the civil service payroll this week? His own personal photographer. Now, there's good news. There's good news for the Prime Minister. There's good news. Apparently he does a nice line in airbrushing.
So it's not on when Lord Dishface does it, but when Ed Miliband does it, well, it's A-OK. And as the ginger growler herself, Angela Rayner, once thundered, she said, the public will be rightly questioning why there is no limit on money for vanity photographers. Well, she's got one herself. Huh. Or is it different now that it's this lot milking the taxpayer? The only £22 billion black hole appears to be her gob. Labour is proven to be a parody of the last Tory government, just with worse hair and even more insufferable virtue signalling. Meanwhile, Red Ed faces a referendum on his eco-zealotry in Doncaster North, where voters, according to polls, are quite supportive of the idea of affordable power, because while Miliband is busy plunging the UK into self-inflicted poverty, China is burning through coal faster than Sauron's Mordor. Miliband, he might have 2 kitchens, but he'll need 2 seats, because Doncaster North, well, I think they're going to tell him what he can do with his eco-hypocrisy, and what the British public and a bacon sandwich did in 2015 will come true again. Right, I mean, I've just had enough of this man. I think I would actually argue that as egregiously offensive as I find Starmer personally, Miliband is worse. I think he's dangerous, actually.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Ed Miliband is worse because he's an ideologue.
Yep.
And he's not working to any even efficiencies, any money, any reports, any science. He's an ideologue, and he's going to destroy people and land as he does it, and he doesn't care.
Yeah. Sorry. To hear from you, Renee, on this panel that Ed Miliband is an ideologue, when, frankly, all of you are ideologues.
Yeah, but we're not running
ridiculous. No, this zealotry against net zero, against facing the fact that something needs to be done about climate change, is absolutely ridiculous. This targeting of Ed Miliband, when actually he's doing the right thing for the country, and it could introduce a re-industrialization of this country and make us a green energy superpower.
Could you just walk me through the idea
that we can ignore all of that.
Okay, Kai,
it's ridiculous.
I'd love that. If we were reindustrialising, where are we going to build the solar panels?
Yeah. Everywhere. I'd have them absolutely everywhere.
Why can we build them in China?
Yeah. Why can we build them cheaper and more effectively here than in China? Why? Like, everyone on the left says that this is such a great economic opportunity, but they cannot tell you very simply why it is a better opportunity than providing cheaper sources of energy, which has been the step change for growth in every single economic step forward over the last 200 years.
You and your ilk
My
20 years ago would talk about clean energy and say that it was unaffordable, right?
It is.
And what we saw,
it still
is solar power and wind power
But doesn't-
by unit falling massively.
hang on, why are we
the cost of those
Why are we
types
still
of power
subsidising
falling
them?
massively.
Why do we still need
to the
to
point where
subsidise
now
them?
it's actually much cheaper than oil and
We
gas.
have the most expensive energy in Europe.
In the world, in the world. Why
Yeah,
do we have to subsidise?
But that's not a problem with wind and solar power.
Kai, I
because
put that
if that was the case, then it would be the same case in Europe.
What is it? We shut down coal and we added wind and solar, and electricity got more expensive. Like, what else do you put it down to?
And killed North Sea oil and gas.
Might I say
Why
as
do we
well?
have to subsidise them, Kai, if they're so cheap?
Why we need to subsidise these industries is as an industrial strategy to move towards Britain
So they're
being...
not cheap.
And no.
They're not cheap.
Britain could be a clean energy superpower. China has
skate
more EVs,
broke
than anywhere else in the world, right?
Yeah,
we
and-
should be listening to
Well, the left-
They're powering those cars. Coal.
The left don't seem to pay attention to the international news because I don't know if anyone here has seen the international news lately, but Norway's government, which has run its entire energy policy on net zero and green craziness, has just collapsed over this exact issue. It collapsed the other day. Now they're saying that they don't want to be doing all of this crazy net zero stuff, and they're even threatening to turn the power lines off to Britain, who they supply us with, I don't know how many percent of Norway's energy we get, and that's how bad it is. Ed Miliband's about to have egg on his face because when they turn the pipes off to us, we're going to have more crisis here. Blackouts.
Janet says Miliband is bad for the country. We want great British food and good management. We do not want the countryside covered in solar panels made in China. And of course, these great whopping
Ridiculous.
bird killers of steel and cement as well. And Greg says shutting down our gas and oil fields, destroying jobs and communities, only to import it on a fossil fuel juggling boat across the ocean for weeks on end from some far-flung hellhole. What a great idea. That's right.
That's the real tragedy of this. That's the real tragedy of this, because not only have we made energy more expensive for average Britons, we've also increased emissions by outsourcing it to China.